So I put out a community post last week asking people, as I go through the process of actually building software and some other services around the business of InterviewAt, do they want to be along for that journey? The community spoke surprisingly to me. 67-ish% of you said, put the content here on this channel. So I'm going to do exactly that instead of creating a new channel and having it somewhere else, because you want to be along for the ride. And in this video, what we're talking about is kind of the process of when you start with something, how can you pre-prepare for an outcome that you're not even sure what it is, but you just know that there's something good in the future? How can you take kind of steps and put in the frameworks of thought to enable you to do things later, even if you hadn't imagined them before, right? And that's kind of a vague statement, a little bit weird, but let's walk through it, right? Because I'm a lifelong product manager. That's all I've really done in my career. I've managed multiple teams with developers, testers, etc. But at my core, I'm a product manager. And when I started InterviewAt, I didn't really know what this was going to be. I had no idea, right? I just wanted to help people, do free mock interviews for people who were looking to land their dream job. But I knew from the get-go, right? And this I pulled this from the guys at Basecamp, which was, what are the data exhaust that will come off this business? And I knew just from having done some auditing of the videos on YouTube that there just weren't really good mock interview questions on YouTube. The mock interview questions are, well, quite frankly, the content's just terrible. And I say that objectively as a guy who's, was a senior leader, senior executive at Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle. I've run my own startups. I've raised money before. Like, I've done all the things and I've built lots of teams. Objectively, if anybody showed up to my interviews and regurgitated some of the answers that pass for great content on YouTube, I would just be like, okay, well, you're just not a match. And maybe that's because the bar is really high. I've been extremely fortunate to work in amazing companies with really, really smart people, but it just wouldn't pass. Because it's people aren't showing up with the content if they follow these rules. They're not showing up with the content to do well in the interviews. And so that's what I'm hoping to solve with a lot of what I share with the people that do their mock interviews. Incidentally, if you'd like to sign up for your free mock interview, you can do so at InterviewAt.com. So as I got through building all of this and kind of getting it on autopilot, I started thinking and listening to customers and thinking about, okay, well, what else could I do? How else can I help? And a question I heard over and over again was, I have trouble mapping the question I get asked to the leadership principle. Now, this clearly came from mostly people targeting Amazon because they're very focused on their leadership principles. But as I talk about on this channel, it doesn't matter if you're interviewing at Amazon or any other company. If you prepare as if you're preparing for Amazon and you think about your stories mapping to leadership principles, you'll do fine, because just about every behavioral interview question will map to, I'll go on record saying 100% of behavioral interview questions can map to a leadership principle. So the question behind the question is what matters. So I went out and built a tool, right? Why? Well, because I wanted to build a piece of software, get my hands dirty again, put finger on the keyboard and start building cool things that people would use on an ongoing basis. And a couple weeks ago, I released guessthelp.com. And frankly, I thought it would be a little tool that some people use. And it turns out it is a page view generating monster. And you guys can't get enough of trying to guess the questions from my data bank, my question bank, trying to map it to leadership principles. It's been amazing, right? I've just watched the numbers every day. I got a little stats page that shows me. It's cool. But here's the thing. When I built that, I didn't really have a vision for what it's going to be. I'm never going to charge for it. It's a cool little tool. I'll just keep adding questions to it. But I knew it would be helpful for people. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, what would I want to know longer term that I can put in now at the front end that might, answer some questions for me? I'm not really sure what those questions are. And so I knew from the get-go, all right, I should probably just track what the guesses are, right? At a minimum, given a question, what are people guessing that's wrong, meaning the leadership principle they actually guessed, and how many guesses is it taking? And I just started tracking that data inside the database. So every time you make a guess, I'm pinging back to the server and I'm recording all that data. And I found some surprising things just over the last week. People trying to guess the leadership principle, that's something that it will be helpful down the road to be able to say, okay, well, for this question, it's this leadership principle, but more often than not, people think it's this one, and let's talk about that. That's a data-based approach to providing content to you, viewers, that is relevant to you. Cool. But for this week, what I looked at was, okay, of the questions that have been shown to people, which ones have gotten the most wrong guesses? And I was a bit surprised. So I was going to do a top 5, but I'm just going to cover the top 3 here for the video for the sake of length. But what's interesting here is, of the top 5, 3 of them, numbers 1, 2, and 4, are think big. Which says to, and by a country mile, like number 5 is, there was a number of wrong guesses, and then number 6, it was about half of the wrong guesses. So these 5 are kind of the standouts for the last week of the questions that got wrong the most. So think big as a category, as a leadership principle, is one that the people appear to be having trouble with. So we'll cover that in depth here. But now let's talk about the questions, because it's interesting, right? So the number 1 question that people get wrong, and I'm going to be reading off my screen here, is how do you drive adoption for your vision or ideas? How do you know how well your idea or vision has been adopted by other teams or partners? Give specific example highlighting one of your ideas. So whenever you're talking about vision or ideas or trying to sell within an organization, these things you're trying to do, and think big is about risk mitigation, right? Think big, if you like the words of the leadership principle, thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Leaders create and communicate a bold direction that inspires results. They think differently and look around the corners for ways to serve customers, right? So when you're selling a vision, you have to think big. You say, I'm selling a vision, this is my vision, right? Vision's one of those words that companies like to use a lot. But that one, to me, feels pretty obvious, but clearly from the number of wrong guesses, and this one is out in front by quite a bit, about 20% more wrong guesses than number 2. So that's pretty surprising. So think big. Just this question, it's the keywords here are vision, selling the vision, right? Can you think big? Can you craft the story around it? And then can you present it to other people so they can digest it, understand the bigness of your thought, but then internalize it and line up to back it, right? So that's important. Number 2, tell me about a time you took a big risk. What was the risk? How did you decide what to do? And what was the outcome? So again, thinking big is about calculated risks. Right? Do you have the ability to understand the totality of what it is you're trying to do? What can go wrong? What are one-way doors? What are two-way doors? And how do you hone that into a thing that you say, you know what? This is a reasonable risk to take. This is a big idea, has a big potential outcome, but I also understand the downside risk and what could go wrong here when things go wrong. I can manage through that. I've got the right guardrails in place. I'm thinking big, right? So I took a big risk, thinking big. And number 3, this was the first of the 2 that were not think big for the record. This one's bias for action, and number 5 was frugality. But number 3, what's the most complex system, application, process, or user interaction model you've ever had to design? Okay, and it's marked as bias for action. This is a mistake in my data set. That's what this is. So the number of people getting this wrong, this is actually a mistake, and it highlights the data is highlighting. This is a dive deep question. You could squint hard and make this bias for action, I guess, because you took the initiative to go and build a thing, but this is absolutely 100% a dive deep question, and I've now got to go fix the record in the database because, oops, I got this one wrong. But if I wasn't tracking the data, I would have never known that this was a thing that people are consistently getting wrong unless someone reached out to me and said, hey, I think this one is wrong. So the key lessons here are, 1, think big seems to be an area where people are a bit confused. And maybe we need more content on that, and I'll be sure to pull some more of the mock interview vids to put on the channel so people can kind of see what those look like. But 2, I didn't know how the data from building this product would help drive additional content, which would then help you, the viewers, to understand, 1, how to run a business, how to think about a business, design products, etc. But 2, how that feeds back into informing decisions that I need to make about how I'm running this business. And this is just a small glimpse because there's some other software I'm going to go build, which is a much bigger, broader idea, which I'll be releasing on these videos, which I guess I'm going to target Wednesdays now. So Tuesdays for office hours, Wednesdays for the kind of product builder journey, and then Thursdays for the content that is the mock interviews. But it absolutely is informed that me, as the purveyor of content to you, what you're struggling with without me having to directly ask you. So it's customer feedback coming in indirectly, which is awesome. But it was the thinking ahead of time of what data exhaust can fall off of this that will help me learn some stuff later that I'm not sure what those questions are, but these are things that I would want to know sort of broadly. Put that in place, let the data start telling interesting stories. And then obviously the kind of happy accident of realizing that, well, I made a mistake. And that's me showing ownership. I made a mistake and now I got to go fix it. So hopefully you got something out of it this week. The builder's journey will continue every week. I hope. We'll see how hard this is going to be doing 3 videos a week. But I love the engagement with the audience, and the people kind of letting me know how much this has been helpful for them has certainly given me the extra push. So thank you very much for all that. We'll talk again next week.